Hello, everybody. I am Karen Bryla McNees, dietitian with the UK Health and Wellness Program, and I am also the Lazy Dietitian. This is a recorded version of Lazy Ways to Manage Food Portions. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate that. A frequent complaint I hear from clients is, I need to watch my portions. I need to cut back on portions. I feel like I'm eating too much. And for various reasons, they feel that way. But I think that this is an important topic for a lot of people. And first, I want to discuss what factors affect how much we eat. Okay, this is probably my top list. There's a few others that come to mind that might not be as applicable to the general population, but let's look at these, and then this is going to inform us about how we can look at some lazy ways to manage our portions. So one factor that affects how much we eat is not recognizing our hunger signals or ignoring our hunger signals when we do feel them. Overly restrictive eating patterns that tend to result in feelings of extreme hunger and deprivation, diet quality, so the quality of one's diet, portions of food, so the amount of food that you are served or served to yourself, emotional eating, so this is any eating you're doing that is not in response to physical hunger, mindless or distracted eating, perhaps when you are multitasking or at work and eating at the same time, or driving in the car and eating. And then finally, food access, meaning how easy is it for you to access different types of foods? Okay. A couple other things I can think of that aren't on that list that may apply to some folks might be certain medical conditions, maybe that affect their, kind of natural hunger signals. There might also be medications that people take that also affect kind of how hungry or not hungry they feel as well. So these are some other things that may come into play as well. But I think this list here is a good start for what applies to most people and most clients I've worked with. Okay, so like I said, we're going to use that list to inform our strategies for how to manage food portions. Okay, so the first one is honoring your hunger. Right, this really doesn't take a lot of time to do. It once you get used to doing it, it shouldn't take a lot of effort or energy to do either. But we do need to pay attention. Okay, we do need to honor our hunger. We need to first of all know what hunger feels like for us. I think most people have a pretty good sense of that. I think it's not so much maybe about identifying hunger as it is about um, trying not to ignore it when you do feel it. That tends to be a pretty big issue for a lot of people. So, for a lot of us, we feel that kind of emptiness in our stomach, maybe a little gnawing or growling in the stomach. Maybe you start to feel a little kind of low energy. Maybe you start to feel a little bit irritable or like it's hard to focus on tasks. So it could be, a combination of physical and kind of psychological symptoms in terms of hunger. Okay, it's really important, I think, to try to, recognize signs of emerging hunger. So, we don't want to wait too long to eat when we do start to feel that hunger, because once we start to get overly hungry, we're not going to make great decisions about what to eat or how much to eat, which is what we're concerned about here. So we do want to look for signs of emerging hunger where you can even start to feel it creeping up and say to yourself, yeah, I'm going to be hungry or ready for a snack or a meal, pretty soon. And then you can start kind of preparing for that and coming up with your plan of like, okay, when, maybe I'm going to take a break from my work at this time to have my snack, and this is what I'm going to eat. And then you can at least start to again, plan and anticipate that instead of getting caught off guard as soon as that, hunger really hits you and you're in the middle of something else. And that's when it can feel easy to just kind of work through it or ignore it at the moment. If needed, maybe set alarms to remind you to eat. Again, I feel like a lot of people during their workday, they report, just working through lunch or, skipping meals and snacks because they're, in meetings or so busy that they don't notice it. So if you need to set these alarms to at least remind you to check in with yourself and say, hey, have you eaten recently? Are you feeling hungry? Should you have a little something? This hunger and fullness scale you see on the left-hand side, this is something that might be helpful. It puts a little language to how hungry or full you might feel. It's on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being the most hungry, and 10 being the most full. So the goal, if we're going to use a scale like this, is to try to stay in the 3 to 7 range, where you're not getting overly hungry and you're not getting overly full. And the amazing thing is that if you initiate eating when you're not overly hungry, it's much easier to not eat past the point of comfortable fullness. Mm. Finally, I do want to say a little bit about proactive eating. There are a lot of instances, I think, in life where you maybe are starting to feel hungry. Um, and then you're going into a situation where food might not be accessible or appropriate to eat, right? Maybe you're going into about to teach a long class, or you're going into a big meeting where it's not appropriate to eat or leave. So in these kind of situations, it might be appropriate to eat something even though you're not feeling like it's quite time to eat yet. I'm not quite hungry enough to eat. This is being proactive. So again, at the end of that event, you're not feeling overly hungry. I would say that one of the leading causes of overeating in the clients I talk to is just having an overly restrictive diet. And a lot of times this is related to, goals of weight loss, things like that. Um, and it's, often a self-imposed thing, right? Of just like, I'm not going to eat any sugar. I'm not going, I'm cutting back on carbs, or, things like that. Which, to some degree, these things may be helpful for health goals, but taking it too far and making it too restrictive, it almost always backfires for people. You end up feeling deprived, and at some point you are going to have access to the foods you've deprived yourself of, and when you do get that access, you are going to go overboard and overindulge. All right. Um, so how can you control yourself around a food if you don't know when you'll eat it again, right? If you've been telling yourself, I'm not eating any chips anymore, even though, maybe you love chips, and that was something you did enjoy to have once in a while, and you've been avoiding them for months and months, and then all of a sudden they show up at a party and you feel out of control around them and you are overeating them. And that's because now you have what's called a last supper mentality. I better eat this now while I can get it, because I'm not supposed to have this. And when this is over, I'm going to tell myself I can't have it again, right? It's going to be off limits again. So a lot of times giving yourself that permission to eat those foods on occasion and in moderation is the answer to that, to actually feeling more in control over time with those types of foods. Okay. I also like to remind people, and I know this is a really, boring message from dietitians, but the whole idea of, moderation, all foods can fit, is, I think, a legitimate one, especially when it comes to creating a pattern of eating that feels sustainable for you. That is what to me is most important with clients, is what you're doing feel sustainable. Can you keep this up? All right. And if you know you can't, or you feel like you can't, that might be a sign that we need to rework some things. And the poison is in the dose. I talk to my clients a lot about that, a little bit of different things here and there, again, on occasion, in moderate amounts, is not going to really make or break anything in terms of what you're trying to do. Now, I will acknowledge that there's some perhaps medical conditions where there's exceptions to this. Okay, maybe somebody is, has celiac disease, and gluten really is like poison to their system, and so yes, you'd want to avoid that, or other perhaps food allergies, or sensitivities. So I understand sometimes that there has to be this restriction for medical reasons, but when it's self-imposed, I think we want to move to a more kind of permissive mindset and embrace that pattern of eating that does allow you to enjoy your favorite foods on occasion and, like I said, in moderate amounts. Okay, so I had mentioned that quality of your diet is something that can affect how much you eat. So if you're consuming a low quality diet, a low nutrient density diet, which would mean not maybe a lot of fiber, not much protein, maybe a lot of what we call ultra processed type foods, right? That is probably not going to feel very satiating. And in fact, a lot of those products are designed to get you to eat more of them. So an antidote to that is to try to focus on fiber and protein throughout the day, trying to incorporate some fiber and protein in your meals and snacks throughout the day. These are the two nutrients that are most likely to help you feel full and to be able to manage cravings. All right. So, food sources of fiber include whole grains, fruits and vegetables, beans and lentils, and nuts and seeds. Food sources of protein include chicken, turkey, beef, pork, fish, shellfish, beans and lentils, eggs, dairy products like milk, yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese, plant-based options such as tofu, tempeh, and seitan, and nuts, seeds, and nut or seed butters. Okay, I know people are hearing a lot about protein these days, and that's great, but let's not forget about the fiber too, right? These are both equally important, and consuming them throughout the day will, like I said, help you manage your appetite. Okay, so obviously we're trying to manage portions, how much we're eating. We need to watch, every time that we're eating a meal or snack, we need to watch the portions of those foods, okay? So a few really direct ways to do this, and what I think are very simple, lazy ways to do this. One is to use smaller plates and bowls. Maybe some of you do this already. You've probably heard this as a trick, but it really does work. If you think about, okay, I'm trying to, eat a smaller bowl of cereal in the morning, okay, and cut back on the portion of that a little bit. If you are still using that huge cereal bowl and putting a smaller portion in there, there's going to be a lot of white empty space in the bowl. And we judge how much food we have based on the white space that is left in a bowl or a plate. So if you see this small amount of cereal in this big white empty looking bowl, that looks really sad to your brain. And it looks like you don't have enough. And it can kick in again those feelings of kind of deprivation and resentment about trying to, cut back on your food portions. So that is why the smaller bowls and plates strategy really does work. It looks full to your brain, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter that's a smaller plate or bowl, it just looks full. All right. And remember, if you think you can't fit everything that you might need to eat to feel full in the bowl or plate, you can always go back for more. Clean Plate Club members. Okay, I'm gonna guess I'm speaking to a few of you here. All right. If you are a member of the Clean Plate Club, definitely using the smaller bowls and plates is helpful. And also, serving yourself less than normal would probably be a helpful strategy. Okay, like I said, you can always go back for more. But if you know you are someone that has a really hard time leaving any food on the plate once it's been served to you or you serve it to yourself, then you need to be very careful about what initially makes it on the plate. All right. Then the other step too is to wait about 20 minutes before deciding whether to eat more. Okay, it's simple, not always easy to do. All right. It takes a little practice. But it takes about that long, 20 minutes, for your stomach to tell your brain you're full. It's a feedback loop, right? The food has to hit your stomach, hit those nerve receptors, and then it's got to go up to the brain and say, "Oh, there's food in here. We're feeling full now." Okay? So it takes some time. So wait the 20 minutes, all right? If you're a clean plate person, also wait the 20 minutes if you're a fast eater like me. Give your brain and stomach that time to communicate and then make a decision on whether you need more or not. Okay, do not eat out of packages. I don't have many food rules. I'm not that kind of dietitian, but if I could have one food rule, it would be that. Do not eat out of packages. I think we all know how dangerous that is, all right? Especially when you're eating out of a food package while you're doing something else, such as, scrolling the internet or looking at your phone or watching Netflix, okay? So yeah, if something is meant to be more than like a single serving container, okay, you need to place what you plan to eat on a plate or bowl and then eat from that. Okay. We're going to talk about distracted, mindless eating in a minute. That's a little bit separate. All right. But do not eat out of the packages. We gauge how much we've eaten based on how much is left. And so if it still seems like we've eaten quite a bit, but there's still a whole bunch of chips still left in the bag, we feel like we need to keep eating more. And we don't get the signal to stop until the bag is, almost empty or completely empty. All right. Serve food away from the table. So if you're having like, meals at home with other people, even if you're eating on your own, um, don't bring the big pots or plates or, whatever of food to the table. Serve the food away from the table because if you are having kind of like that family style eating where everything is, right in front of you, it's going to be easier to pick at things and start eating more than you really are hungry for. So yeah, it's kind of like being at a buffet, but the buffet is just sitting right in front of you the whole time that you're eating. That's really what it is. So, really try to serve the food away from the table. Keep it on a counter or on the stove where you need to get up from the table to go serve yourself more. And just a word about eating out, because this is a place where people really struggle with portions. We know that, when you do go eat out, portions can tend to be pretty big, bigger than what most of us need to feel comfortably full. So just a couple strategies for that. Trying to look for smaller portion items. Sometimes you can get away with ordering like, a lunch portion or a kid portion. Sometimes, certain restaurants and menus have kind of like calorie conscious, smaller portioned, healthier things. So you can look for those. Certainly at places like a more of like a fast food type place, you want to avoid the meal deals. Okay. Get the sandwich, but please skip the fries, skip the soda. That's where all the extra kind of, empty type of low quality calories are going to come into play. If you're more at like a sit down restaurant, or even again, if it's more of like a fast casual place, you could ask for a box ahead of time, or ask for the box to come with your food, and then put half in the box before you even begin eating. I can't tell you how many clients I've had tell me that, well, I intended to eat half and then take the rest home. But the longer I sat there, talking and socializing or getting distracted, the more I ate. And then I realized that, I ate almost the whole thing and there wasn't much left to take home. So that does happen. So definitely, again, get that box and even just, again, proactively just put half of it in there. If you're still hungry, then eat a little bit more out of the box, but at least to give yourself kind of that chance to stop where you intended to. Okay, so tune into emotional eating. All right. I do have a lazy dietitian video called Lazy Ways to Deal with Emotional Eating. So if this is a big problem for folks, I would definitely recommend going back and reviewing that video. Okay. But here's some highlights from that video about some strategies for that. That if you feel you are often eating in response to emotions instead of physical hunger, that's something we need to start exploring, right? You need to start figuring out, okay, what am I feeling? What is it that I need? Okay, am I bored? Am I sad? Am I lonely? Um, yeah, so trying to first figure out what are the feelings, okay? Um, and then from there, what do I need to be able to soothe myself? And then you can start building a self-care toolbox that includes non-food ways to soothe yourself. Okay. I know it is very easy to soothe ourselves with food because food is everywhere and it's pretty accessible. Okay. And a lot of the, not so high quality stuff can be pretty cheap too. So it can feel very easy to soothe yourself with food. But we need to just start building that toolbox of other non-food things you can do. All right. And turn to. Some people just have trouble in the moment distinguishing between physical hunger and emotional hunger. So, again, going back and watching that video will give you a good breakdown of the differences between emotional and physical hunger. But if you're generally just unsure, you might try what's called the delay, distract, decide method. So, you would basically, say, all right, I feel like eating, but I'm not really sure if I'm hungry or it's just an emotion or something else. Let me wait 10 minutes. And then you go distract yourself, without food, stay away from the kitchen, distract yourself for a little bit, and then come back and make the decision. It's really like a timeout button for yourself, right? It's like a timeout for adults. Um, and then come back and make that decision. But at least it lets you cool off, get away from kind of the heat of the moment, those hot emotions that might have risen up that prompted your desire to eat, and then you can see how you feel. Okay, so eat more mindfully. I think that one of the biggest things here is to limit distractions. All right. I find screens especially problematic. I know for myself, but I think in talking to clients as well, that if you are looking at a screen, I feel like that is just so consuming of your senses, and also your mind as well, that it makes it really hard to be able to focus on your food and your eating, the pleasure you're getting from your food, how full you're starting to feel, right? And that's why we want to eat mindfully, because we need to pay attention to all of those things, right? We want to enjoy our food, optimize that enjoyment and pleasure from food. We want to be paying attention to that brain and stomach communicating about, how full are we getting, right? And we can't do that when we're distracted, all right? So I find screens particularly problematic. I think if people felt like it was really awkward to eat, especially if you're alone, it can be quite awkward, or, not that fun to eat in total silence. Maybe listening to something. I often recommend maybe putting on some music or listening to a podcast or putting the TV on, but not looking at the screen and just listening. I feel like that allows you to be a little bit more mindful, because at least you're not, again, looking at the screen. Of course, ideally, hopefully, you're able to eat with other people from time to time. And when you're doing that, hopefully you are, socializing and engaging in pleasant conversation, which is the ideal thing to be doing, while you're eating, for sure. But I do understand that in some situations, especially when people maybe go out and it's socializing and eating together, that socializing kind of turns more into a distraction, than something that's helpful. So do be careful of that. Okay. Um, but again, yes, sitting down, eating, even if you've portioned out your snack. So we talked about like taking, a snack and portioning it out on a bowl or plate, and then, not eating out of the package. I would say at that point, even eating that, you know, not without distraction. So again, a lot of people will have like the bag of chips and like go sit down and watch Netflix, and then they've eaten the whole bag of chips and not even really noticed it or tasted it or enjoyed it because they were distracted, right, watching something. So even if you take those chips and control the portion in a bowl or plate, I still think it's important to try to eat those chips without distraction, because that is how you're going to optimize enjoyment. Your brain cannot register the pleasure and enjoyment, fully, of eating, if you are distracted. So really, to the extent you can, trying to do that as much as possible, whether it's a meal or a snack. Okay. Trying to engage your senses, right? Really try to, look at the food, appreciate it, maybe smell it, appreciate, notice the textures of it as you're eating, the flavors of it. Okay. So really just trying to make it kind of the sensual experience it's meant to be. Slow down your eating. Like I said, I'm a fast eater. I understand the challenge of this. That's where, again, it's really helpful to wait 20 minutes after you eat your first plate of food to see how full you really are after the 20 minutes. Um, it can be hard to slow down. I I I have not found a lot of great strategies for myself. I find that sometimes like putting my fork down and just putting my hands in my lap for a few moments in between bites can be helpful. Taking some sips of water. I find that often I try to be more of like the conversationalist during dinner, because that will slow me down with eating, with my family. I try to pay attention to the people around me, and how they're eating, and try to pace myself to them. That is something I have found to be actually very helpful to do. Like, oh, look at me. I'm almost done with my plate of food, and they're only like a quarter of the way through. Maybe I'm eating too fast. So using other people is a little bit of a cue as well. Connecting with our food. I mean, we're not really great about that probably in this culture or country, but thinking about where it came from, how it was prepared, who prepared it, who are you sharing it with, right? Food. We're lucky, right, to have, access to as much food as we do in this country. I think we do take it for granted. Even good food we take for granted. And so we really do want to try to connect with that gratitude and appreciate our food. Okay. And then finally, we want to be intentional about food access. Um, and I don't mean this from like a food insecurity standpoint. That's a whole nother issue. But this is more about how you kind of store your food. Do you keep it where it's very visible? Do you keep it where it's easy to reach? Okay. So we do know that if you can see food and or easily reach it, you are more likely to eat it. It's that simple. Now, you can use that in a couple different ways. One, if it's something you don't want to be prompted to eat as often, such as, the bag of chips, well, then let's put the bag of chips in the back of the pantry where it's not going to be the first thing that you see when you open the pantry, right? Or the ice cream, it's not going to be the first thing you see when you open the freezers. It's underneath the frozen vegetables and frozen fruit, right? It's not that it's not there and you're not really trying to hide it from yourself, but we do know those visuals are really important. If you see it, you're going to be prompted to eat it. But you could use it the other way. Maybe you could put foods you want to be prompted to eat more often where they're easy to see. So maybe that's why the fruit gets put at the front of the refrigerator because it's the first thing you see. Or, the peanut butter and whole grain crackers get put, at the front of the pantry where that's the first thing you see if you go in there for a snack, right? So you can use this to your advantage that way as well. And also, think about, especially with how easy it is to reach. Like uh, physically, how easy is it to get to? Maybe putting things in like high up or low down, cabinets where it's not as easy to get to. Maybe, at work, this is a huge issue. I see people are putting things like right in their desk drawer or the, candy on the desk right in front of them where they can see it and easily reach it, right? That's a perfect storm. So trying to, again, put some of those things where you can't see it, trying to put it where at least you have to get up out of your chair, away from your desk to go get that food. So variety is important from a nutrition standpoint, also from an enjoyment standpoint, right? But we do know that too many choices can lead to overeating. That is kind of like the buffet effect, right? When you go to a buffet and you have all these options, and that's one of the reasons people tend to overeat at a buffet or a potluck for that matter, because you're like, oh, look at all the things. I got to try a little bit of everything, and then that adds up to a lot. Um, I have that experience sometimes if I, get the groceries and I've got all this new stuff at home and it's like, oh, and you want to try like a little bit of everything because it's so exciting to have all these, fun new things there, right? So I think, that's going to look a little different for everybody about how many choices or too many choices, but just do be aware of that, okay? You want enough choices that, at any given time you can satisfy kind of different food preferences that you might have, but you don't want so many choices that it feels either overwhelming or like you want to eat, all the things all the time. All right. So finding that balance that works for you. If there are foods that you find overly tempting, maybe consider not keeping them in the house. Again, this is not about restriction, okay, or deprivation. This is about just being practical, honoring what you know about yourself, right? If, for example, you really do love ice cream, but you feel like, I don't know if it's a great idea to keep a half gallon of ice cream in my freezer all the time, well, then maybe, you know, once a week you tell yourself, hey, I'm going to go to Grader's or wherever you like to get ice cream and get a scoop to enjoy, okay? Or if you really love chips and think, gee, I probably shouldn't keep a whole chip bag in my pantry, well, maybe once in a while, you go get like a single serve bag of chips at the store and just enjoy those, right? So finding ways to still enjoy those foods without having to kind of deal with sometimes the struggle that comes of keeping them readily accessible at home. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here and tuning in. I hope that this was helpful information for you. And as always, feel free to reach out to me directly if there is anything I can help you with. Thank you. Bye.